The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around a subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject matter. Welcome to episode 72 of The Things We All Carry. Ricky Nuttall is a London firefighter with one hell of a story. On June 14th of 2017, he was dispatched to a structure fire during the early morning hours. That fire turned out to be the deadliest fire in London since World War II. He joined over 250 other first responders to battle a blaze, a devastating blaze at Grenfell Tower. Grenville claimed the lives of 72 residents and injured over 70 more. Ricky shares his insights and his personal story of that night, as well as how it affected his mental health. Today, he uses that experience and his recovery in presentations to schools, fire departments, and prisons, just to name a few. He is now a mental health advocate focusing on raising awareness on the importance of social and workplace mental health and well-being. He'll be the first to tell you that he suffered from PTSD after Grenfell. He was forced to make decisions that night that altered his life. Add to that childhood trauma and various other service-related traumas, it combined to throw his life into a tailspin. He survived his battle with some very serious demons, and he is here today to tell the story of recovery. Ricky coined the phrase, "Firefighters leave incidents, but incidents don't leave us." In other words, these are the things we all carry. A quick reminder to please help us build a community which not only recognizes but supports each other through the struggles and recovery. Reach out through Instagram at The Things We All Carry or email mystory@thethingsweallcarry.com to offer support and share your story. Please remember to leave a review on iTunes and give a shout out to any first responder you know, love, or care about. Y'all enjoy this show.
I was often going to say it's kind of how I feel things are in, say, track and field athletics. You know, everyone knows how to run, but each runner has their own style.
Yeah.
If they study somebody else's running and try and emulate that running, they're never going to truly find their own style, and then probably never quite reach the heights they could have.
Yeah, and that's
trying
like,
to be something that's uniquely you.
right. And those greats are exactly that, uniquely them. And so if a coach comes and tries to mess with their style, yeah, they don't achieve what they could have achieved. That's part of coaching is trying to learn how to stay out of natural talent's way.
Yeah, 100%.
So, and that's the same thing with public speaking. It's to stay out of the way and get your own message across. So yeah, this morning I just kind of want to. It's a conversation about you. You know, where you came from, how you ended up in the fire service, what your fire career was like. Obviously, you have to talk about Grenfell some. Because that's the most, I'm guessing that was the most impactful call of your career, but I'm also going to guess that you've had numerous other impactful calls, or even the smaller calls that weren't maybe as significant, but still kind of weighed on you. So anything you want to touch on and talk about fire related, I'm all game for. And then obviously I kind of want to focus on what you're doing now and how, the recovery from that your process of recovery, how you found a recovery, and now what you're doing to kind of pay it forward. Because I think that's the most important part of my show is focusing on that recovery piece and showing people that, yeah, we can go through traumatic calls and we can go through traumatic incidents, but it's what we do on the backside of it that kind of proves who we are.
Yeah, 100%. And I think quite often how you respond to trauma, or any just difficult things in life generally, how you respond to that is a true depiction of who you are as a human being inherently inside, like who you really truly are, you know?
Yeah.
You can learn coping methods, you can go to counseling, you can do all of these things, and they'll teach you all of these bits and pieces. But that whole fight or freeze response system that we all have, I believe that's the same in terms of getting over trauma. It's a case of there will come a point when you're well enough again to go, right, I'm through this. I never want to talk about it again. And I'm just going to get on with my normal life. Or you go, as I have, that was horrendous. That was really hard. I don't want anyone else to feel that way. How can I help them?
Yeah, and I know that I sent you a couple of links to the show, and I don't expect my guests to have listened to my show, so I kind of lay it out for you at the beginning. I started the show because in my area, I live in Virginia, so just south of Washington D.C. So it's we call it the DMV, so it's the District, Maryland, and Virginia. It's a kind of a tight area where you kind of travel in between the three places easily. And in that DMV area in 2021, we had a gentleman. He was a volunteer firefighter near me who killed himself, and he turned out to be the fifth one in our area for that calendar year. And it was at that point it just hit me. I was like, no, we're not talking about this, and because we're not talking about it, nobody knows what to do with it when it happens. And so their reaction is they let it build and build and build, and then they end up taking their own lives, unfortunately. And so that's when I decided to do something like this and just kind of shine a light, for lack of a better term, kind of on the roaches that nobody sees, because it scatters when the light goes on. And
Yeah.
so
Very strangely enough, this morning, just before I went to sleep, I received a phone call from my fire station, my firehouse, saying they'd gone out to a firefighter last night who tried to kill themselves. Now, this is unusual in the sense that it's a firefighter trying to kill themselves, so that is still unusual. It's way more common than it should be, but it still isn't that common. And it turns out that it was a female firefighter, and it turns out it's a female firefighter who is my friend.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And that was literally, she's okay.
Okay, good.
But it's not the first time that she's done this. So yeah, it's a very, very poignant time for me in terms of exactly what you just said. You know, when it comes to people taking their own lives, it's bad. As a man, when it comes to men doing it at the rate they are, it's bad. When it comes to firefighters doing it, it really rams at home. And when it's a firefighter who's a friend,
yeah,
you're then like, wow.
Yeah. And then I know for me, when I found someone that maybe at least was considering it or had a plan or ideation, and I think back and I think, well, what did I miss as a friend or as a coworker? And so then it starts to build on you that way as well. And
yeah. And when you're in a position like you are and like I am, where all we're doing is, well, not all we're doing, but so much of what we're doing is talking about mental health, talking about recovery, talking about where, well, certainly for me, where I had been mentally not in a very good place, where I have felt suicidal. You just can't help but look and go, well, how much more do I need to do for that person to just call me rather than do that? How much more out there do I need to be for this person to go, I'm going to call it? Because they know that I'm here. They know that I've got some words of advice. They know that I've got people that I can put them in touch with, that can offer them support, that can help if they don't want me for that. It doesn't have to be me. But how much more do we all need to be doing for them to stop?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, you have resources on your webpage. I have resources on my webpage. We're both make ourselves available. You know, I mean, I'll give my number out to anybody that needs to talk, and if you don't have it, then it's very easy to ask for it, because I will give it out. And it's the same thing when you find out or when something happens, it's that reaction. Well, what more did I need to do?
Yeah.
So before we get too far into this, let's do an introduction, and I'll get some of your background growing up and how you ended up in the fire service. So thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. I'll let you introduce yourself, but I'll quickly tell people what your name is. You're Ricky Nuttall, and you're right. This morning we're finding you in London, correct?
I'm in Wales.
Wales. Okay. My apologies. So
no problems.
So how are you? I know you worked last night, so I know you're tired. So if you just give a brief synopsis, maybe a little bit. Where'd you grow up?
I'm 42. I grew up. I had a bit of a disjointed growing up stage because my dad was in the army. So the first few years of my life, I was actually born in Northern Ireland in Ballymena, because my dad was stationed there during the Northern Ireland conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I was only there for the first year of my life, and then my dad was posted to Cyprus. So we then moved to Cyprus. I then spent 3 years in Cyprus, and then my mum and dad separated. My mum had a miscarriage, and immediately wanted to get pregnant again, did. But by the time that she'd sort of, that miscarriage did her a lot of damage. She'd never expected to have one. She was quite young. My mum was still only, I think, 24 or something at this point. And she already had 2 children, my older brother and myself. And I think it just really hit her, this miscarriage, and it became a wedge between her and my dad. My dad, being an army military man, and especially back in those days, his ability to emotionally give my mum what she needed was pretty much non-existent. So my mum is in a foreign country, isolated from a lot of friends and family and the people that you would normally get support from, and she just wanted out. So she just said, I'm sorry, I can't stay here. And she took a pregnant belly, me and my older brother, and stuck us on a plane back to the UK, thinking when we got back to the UK, everything would be fine. She was under the impression naively that the government would say, oh, you're single and you have children. Well, here's a lovely house in a nice area, and here's some financial help, and here's this and here's that. And we arrived to none of those things. She was given somewhere to live by the council fairly quickly, but it was in a really bad area, in a not nice sort of council block. And so we then spent the first few years of our life in a really bad area. And those years, by this point now, I'm sort of 4 or 5. And these are the very earliest building block phases of your development as a child. It's the very earliest phase of when you are learning what people are like, which people are nice, which people aren't. Some big influential sort of days in your life when you're learning right and wrong, what socially is acceptable and what socially isn't acceptable. And if you do that in a worse area with, dare I say, more impoverished people who have less hope, they believe the scope of things that they believe are more acceptable are completely different from, the upper echelons of society. So I was in an area where it was okay to rob people. It was okay to steal. It was okay to swear and spit in the street. And whilst I was only 5, they are my earliest memories of the type of people that I was being surrounded with. And so my mum was a little bit desperate. And my mum, on a side note, wasn't a particularly well-educated person by this point. She wasn't a good learner at school. And again, back in those days, unfortunately, what it meant, and especially being a woman, what it meant was her teachers literally said to her, you need to marry well.
Instead of making an effort.
Yeah, you've got no hope in life. You're stupid. You're not going to ever do anything very well. So you need to marry well. So I suggest you pick a good husband. And obviously here she is now, separated from a husband that she'd picked, and thinking and realizing at this point, I guess, that, wow, there isn't really that much hope at the moment. And then my stepdad came along. She was introduced to, I think it was on a blind date. And he was a police officer, and initially seemed very, very good. He was willing to take on a newborn baby and 2 other children. When you look at it from that perspective, you go, wow, what an incredible man. To take on 3 children, he must really have loved my mum. There was obviously a good connection there, and they did really love each other. And I think they fell in love quite quickly. Unfortunately, my stepdad had never had children before. He had no parenting skills whatsoever. And his only model for what it looks like to raise children was the one that he had from his dad, and his dad was extremely strict. And so very quickly, my stepdad was employing disciplinary methods in situations that he didn't need to, and in ways that were very hard on children that were very young. As an example, I can't even remember what it was that we had done wrong. And I'm going to say wrong a few times in the old inverted commas, because, your children, you're 5 and 6. You can be a bit mischievous. We're not talking about, setting fire to things. We're on about just general kids stuff.
No, you're learning your way.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember him shouting at us and calling us into the living room area. And on his lap, he had a pot of English mustard, a wooden spoon and a slipper. and he made us choose which punishment we were going to have. And so we would literally, I remember as a 6-year-old child standing there weighing it up, like, well, what do you do with the mustard? Well, that's going in your mouth. Okay, well, is that a teaspoon or a tablespoon of mustard? Now you're weighing up the quantities, trying to work out how much pain you're going to be in. Where's the wooden spoon go? Back of the hand or palm of the hand? Where's the slipper? Is it through the clothes or is it on a naked bum? And I remember, trying to work out, right, which one of these is going to hurt me the least. Now, there will be a lot of people listening going, oh, well, that's nothing. My dad used to beat me with a belt. He used to do this, he used to do that. What I would say to those people is that none of that is okay. And all of it is unnecessary. When you actually learn how to be a parent, and we'll circle back around to this when it comes to my parenting later on. When you learn about being a parent and you become a good parent, you don't need to torment your children. You don't need to control them with fear for them to be good human beings. You need to understand them, and they need to understand what they've done is wrong, why what they've done is wrong, and how they can make better choices next time. It is actually a very simple process. And as, in my opinion, as proof of how simple it is, why does that behavior not carry on when you become an adult? Why does your boss at work, when you've missed a report deadline, not call you into the office and say, right, you've got wooden spoon, you've got mustard, you've got a slipper. Which one do you want? Because society wouldn't tolerate it, because you'd go, that's ridiculous. That's not how you deal with a problem.
It's ironic that you bring this up, because I had this discussion at work just the other day. One of my coworkers said he said it was ridiculous to think that you could ever parent without some sort of corporal punishment. And I said, well, I think you're completely wrong. And he said, well, some kids just need it. And I said, no, I think if you know how to parent, you don't need it. It's 100%. All about an approach. And you said it, it's the key word is consistency.
Yeah. And there are reasons to everything. Now, and again, we'll circle back to when it comes in, reasons and excuses come into my parenting story with my son later on in this talk. But there is a huge difference between reasons and excuses. Mm-hmm. A reason is why something has happened. An excuse is you justify why that thing happened.
Right.
And that's the main difference. And so anyway, we'll circle back to that. But so that was my earliest memory of my stepdad. And what effectively then happened is those behaviors continued. And because my mum was in a position where she was thinking that because she has to marry well, because our prospects are looking very bleak without a man in her life, and that's for us as well. She was in a horrendous position where she had to watch disciplinary methods be used on a regular basis on the children she loved by a man that she loved, that she didn't agree with, that she could see were upsetting for all parties concerned apart from him. And she decided that was still our best chance. And so what that meant was she was going, well, we're going to move into a nice house in a better area. That gives them a better chance of a good school, gives them a better chance of a good future. And so whilst they're being, beaten with slippers or all of the other stuff that went on with him, that's still probably their best chance. And when you weigh it up like that, what a horrific position for a parent to be in, what a horrendous place for a mum to have to be. Because I know she didn't agree with what he did. She hated it. She hated the way he was with us. But he loved her in such a fantastic way. It was like these two completely separate things that were at loggerheads, She feels loved, and he loved her like no one had ever loved her before. And he's providing her with a good home and a stable living environment in terms of we're not having to move from council property to council property. But she's got two very unhappy children.
Yeah, it's quite a trade-off, and you have to wonder how it played in her mind.
Well, I've had chats with my mum about this, because the very first time I ever recorded a podcast with somebody, this stuff was the first time that was the first time I'd spoken about this stuff. And it was on a podcast, and two of my brothers, because my mum had two children with him as well. So my two technically half brothers, but for all intents and purposes, brothers, like I grew up with them, love them both to pieces, but they weren't aware of any of this. And I didn't know they weren't aware of it. And so the next thing, I've sent them this podcast, like, well, let me know, I'm really proud of this podcast. What do you think? And they were livid. They thought I'd made stuff up to make it sound more interesting on a podcast. And they both phoned up my other brother and said, is this true? And he said, it was worse than what Rick said. And they phoned my mum and did Steve do this? And she was like, I'm really sorry, but yeah, he did. And they've had to quite brutally come to terms with the fact that their dad isn't who they thought he was. And I think there's still an element of disbelief about it, which I can understand to a point.
So they didn't experience this?
No. It was my older brother and me. My younger brother, Daniel, my full brother, he was a baby. So I think his connection with my stepdad was different because he was a baby. He was, my older brother and myself had already developed into who we were. And I think I probably reminded my stepdad way too much of my dad. I'm very, very similar, look similar, sound similar. So that probably didn't help me particularly. Although I was a very well-behaved kid by general terms. I've never been arrested. I was never given detention at school. I went to a grammar school, which in the UK is like a different school that you go to if you're intellectually capable. So you get a chance of going to a much better school than a regular run-of-the-mill schools. I was a good kid. And yet, I was still getting all of these beatings and stuff that my older brother was getting. His downfall was he was extremely mouthy. He wasn't particularly well behaved, and he's the most pridefully stubborn man I've ever met in my life. He's the kind of person where if you held a knife to him and said, "Give me your phone," he'd throw it down the drain and say, "Fetch." And then he would say, "I've given you my phone. What's your problem?" And I'd be there going, "We're going to be stabbed. Just hand it to him. It's a phone." But we're very different people in that respect. And there's a large part of that I really respect in him.
Yeah, you guys had two different approaches at childhood, but it put a target on both your backs for your stepdad.
Yeah, effectively, yeah. And I don't think there was anything, unless we were perfect children, I don't think there's anything, in fact, not even perfect children, unless we were perfect. I don't think there's anything that would particularly have changed, because I would go as far as to say I was a fairly perfect child when you look at what a child is. I wasn't a perfect person. Yes, I got things wrong. I was naughty sometimes. I was noisy when I was told be quiet, and but I wasn't running riot in the streets. I wasn't having parents knocking on the door complaining that I'd beaten their kid up or anything like that. I was a good kid. So I think it was way more a him issue than it was an us issue.
Yeah. So there's, like you said, there's probably nothing you could do to prevent what he was going to do anyway.
Yeah. Definitely. So that was sort of childhood in a nutshell. And that all came to a head when I was about 12. There was an incident between him and my older brother that got a little bit out of hand. My brother was, he ended up hurt. And so we went, this had been going on for 7 years by this point, and we went to visit my dad for the weekend. He came and collected us. He was aware of some bits and pieces, but not the full extent. And so we waited until we got far enough away from the house that we thought my dad wouldn't turn a car around, go back and beat this man to death. And told him what had been going on. And he drove us straight to a police station. And we filed charges against my stepdad for child abuse. And we never went home. So I literally left my school, every friend I ever had, my area where I grew up, everything I knew was gone overnight. And whilst that was a huge relief, I remember the relief I felt when I realized I didn't have to go back there. And then I remember the pain that I felt when I realized I was no longer going to live with my brothers. I was no longer going to see my friends. I was no longer going to, be in an environment where absolutely everything that was familiar to me was now gone. And that was quite hard. And it was a very hard adjustment. I'd moved from Kent in England to London, which is an extremely different place. They were like polar opposites. In my school in Kent, there was one Asian kid in the whole school. It was a very, very white dominated area. And I was at a grammar school, as I said, like, for more gifted kids. And then I ended up in a school in Tooting in London, which is where I still live now. And I was one of 6 white kids in the entire school.
So a little bit of a culture shock.
Huge culture shock. Yeah, huge culture shock. And they were covering things in the second year of secondary school that I'd covered at the very start of my first year of secondary school in the other school. I was so far ahead. So I didn't have to try. I didn't have to work hard. It was about survival for me. It was literally about surviving my school environment. How could I adapt? And that's where I learned how to, what I call chameleon myself in society. And it's something that's really paid dividends for me because I feel like I've got the process right. And it's the process of blending into your environment, but still remaining a lizard.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in a jungle. I'm surrounded by all these different animals. I'm a chameleon. So I need to be able to change my colors and blend in. But I need to remember I'm still a lizard, because if I start to try and act like a tiger, suddenly I'm going to be surrounded by tigers. And when you're a lizard, that's not a good place to be. So I've had to learn to do that. And that's paid huge rewards in adult life, because it's also meant that I can do the same thing in work environments. It means I can be in a fire station and I can be a lad, use our dark sense of humor that we all have when we need to cope with traumatic things that we've seen sometimes. But it also means I can be there when someone says something that might be missed by some other people. And I think, hang on, there's something in there. And I'll take them away to the side and I'll go, you're right. You said such and such. It made me feel like this. And then they'll open up a bit. And that's what I mean by chameleoning yourself, and if I'm dumped at a dinner table surrounded by very posh people, I know how to not sound like I do now.
Yeah, I can control the F-bombs in certain situations.
Yeah. Only some. There's some of them. Sometimes that inappropriate comment just falls out your face and you're like, oh.
And it was probably deserved at the time. So
Yeah.
I was gonna relate the chameleon to myself. I mean, I'm a tried and true introvert. And so to be in a firehouse for 24 hours at a time, you have to chameleon at some point. And some of that time, sometimes chameleon for me is I just have to get away, and I seclude away for a half hour or so and come back and I'm good. Or it's sitting at a table almost involved, but not involved, because it's time to kind of check out for a minute so I can get my own presence back in line.
Yeah, I think sometimes with fire station or firehouse banter, you can be involved just by participating in a laugh.
Yeah.
You don't have to contribute the stuff that's making people laugh, but you can be there and still be a part, and I think that's a key involvement, because let's face it, just because we're firefighters, I always say to people that firefighters aren't extraordinary people. We're people that do extraordinary things. Just because you're a firefighter, society thinks that you're going to be very altruistic. They think you're going to be very kind. They think you would never have stolen something. You would always stop to help that old lady cross the road. You would always do this. You would always do that. And I turn around and I say, firefighters were before they were firefighters.
Yeah, just people.
Humans.
Yep.
They were just regular people. We are still just regular people. Society affords us a status based on an ID card.
Mm-hmm.
And whilst a lot of us are different people and we've gone into the job we've gone into because we are different, we are still just people. We can still be hurt. We can still fail. We can still mess up.
So talk about the fire department. How do you find yourself to the fire service?
So when I left school, being a firefighter was something I always wanted to do.
Okay.
My mum tells a really cute story because of my mum's low expectations of what life can provide. She tells me this really cute story when I was 3 and I said to her, Mummy, I want to be a firefighter or fireman, I would have said back then. When I grow older, I want to be a fireman. And she said she remembers smiling and going, oh, that would be amazing, darling. and thinking to herself, that's never going to happen, because life had taught her that you don't get what you want.
Right.
Life delivers what it delivers, and you take it on the chin. And so I don't remember having this conversation with her, but I do remember growing up, I used to play with Lego a lot, probably, in fairness, way later on into my life. I should have. But, if you put a box of Lego out in front of me now, I'd dive into it. I love it. But every Lego set that I owned when I was younger was fire stations, fire engines, fire helicopters, fire this, fire that. I just loved it. I loved the idea of turning up really extrovertly, like sirens, a light, and I'm here, and then doing something heroic and saving someone and actually making a direct, immediate improvement in somebody's life. And that was it for me. I think it was the benefit reward thing. I think it was, I want to be the person that looks at someone and says, you're okay because I'm here. And I guess it's probably a reflection of what I felt I needed as a child that I never had. I never had that person that said, you're okay because I'm here. And I know how that feels to not have that. So I wanted to give that to people. I wanted that to be my gift to the world. I'm going to turn up and I'm going to make your really bad day a lot better.
Yeah. I think I hear that quite often, that theme of, this isn't something I had growing up, so I wanted to provide it. And
yeah. Whether I think it's quite
whether it's actually said or not, it doesn't matter. I think it's evident in behavior patterns, at least.
I think a lot of people aren't introspective enough to work out why they do what they do. I think it's a question not very many people ask themselves, because quite often, we're all a little bit messed up.
Yeah.
The things we all carry, that we've all got. And I think if everybody looked into themselves without the healing routes readily available, they'd probably unpack a load of stuff when they go, I have got no idea what I'm doing with this now. Why have I even opened that box? So I think a lot of people just plug along and just go, do you know what? Who cares why I'm here? It's all right. Let's just crack on.
Yeah, that introspection escapes people at times.
Yeah. And it's a hard thing to do, because the more introspective you are, the more things you realize about yourself that you probably aren't going to like. The more you look at yourself, because we are all human beings, we are all flawed. And it's when you start uncovering those flaws, you think you'll find one and you find 12 and you're like, oh God, I'm a horrendous person.
Yeah.
How did this happen? And you're not. It's, the person next to you might have 50 flaws. You've found 12 in you. Like, well done. You're all right.
Yeah. That's like leaving therapy. You go in feeling about one thing, you come out feeling, like you said, 12 different things. You're like, oh, well, thanks for that. That was an hour well spent.
Yeah. There is a definite downslope before the upslope when it comes to therapy. That's for sure.
All right. So you something you always wanted to do. And I'm ignorant as to the process of how you joined the fire department in England or in London or whatever, if it's different across the country for you guys. So
it's the process has changed somewhat now. When I joined back in 2005, well, the process for me started in 2001. It was kickstarted from what I remember again by the events over in America, 9/11. And I looked at that and I was like, no, this really is something I want to do. You look at a disaster on that scale and you go, wow, like the bravery of those men and women when you see that iconic photo of, the firefighter going up the stairwell.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've walked up flights of stairs and you realize, oh my God, how many flights of stairs were they walking up with all of that equipment, 70 pounds worth of equipment additional. And they're going into an environment that some of those guys probably were thinking, I'm probably not going to come out of this. And yet they carried on, It takes some level of bravery to be walking in a direction, knowing that direction is probably going to cost you your life, and you still put one foot in front of the other and do it. It's almost insane when you actually think about what that does to your brain. And so I was like, it sort of reignited my fire. It reignited my want to join the fire service. So I looked up online and how do I join? How do I join? And this was before the internet process had really kicked off for all that sort of stuff. It was still paper forms and stuff like that. So I found a number and you had to call the number and you leave your name and address details. Then they randomly select application forms to be sent out to people. And so for 4 years, I couldn't even get an application form.
Yeah,
For 4 years.
that's a crazy thought. It's just a lottery, a luck of the draw.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I guess you could look at that and go, well, how badly do you want it?
True.
Because I had to do jobs I didn't like and I didn't want to do for 4 years, dreaming of a day when I would be doing this job. And it kept being, I felt, taken away from me. No, can't have it. Just luck says no. It's very difficult to accept that, it feels unjust. It's like, well, give me a chance. I know I'm right for this job. If I could just get an application form. And after 4 years, I finally got an application form. And then, like I said, you have to fill that out, post that off, did that. And then I got through everything, first time. And and again, I count myself very fortunate there because so many people got application forms and applied and had to apply 5 or 6 different times and kept failing at different stages.
Yeah.
And I got through the whole thing, first go and everything. And then in 2005, I started my training at our central training centre, which doesn't exist anymore, Southwark, in Southwark in central London. And what an iconic place to start your training in the middle of your country's capital city. It was the best time. It's 4 months of going from being somebody who works in an office and craps their pants when the drill instructor screams at them to somebody who confidently runs up ladders, takes leg locks, sticks their head in a room full of fire and sprays water at it. It's a hell of a transformation in 4 months when you look at how much you learn. And then you arrive at your first fire station and you I remember looking around going, wow, my first car fire on my very first night shift. And I remember sitting down on the floor after we put the fire out and stuff, and we're waiting for the police to attend because it was suspicious circumstances. And the sun had starting to come up. And I thought, wow, what a job.
Yeah, it hooks you right away, doesn't it?
Really did. Yeah, it really did.
I had a townhouse fire on my first day as a rookie, and I was on the nozzle, and I remember coming out of that thinking, oh, all right, I found it. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it is a lovely feeling. I remember going home. I was so excited when I went home, like a child. Bear in mind, what would I have been then? 2000, I was 24. So I'm 24 years old. And I'm going home to my dad like a kid, like, we did this, really excited. Because I was living back, I'd split with a partner. And so I was living back at home at that point. So yeah, I remember being really childlike about it. But that again just goes to show like how incredible is it that you can grow up wanting to do something, end up doing it, and love going to work.
Right.
That's a gift that so many people don't have and have never had.
I was going to say, you thought it was not odd, but you remarkable that you're 24 and you're going home and you felt like a child about it. I was 44 when I was a rookie and I felt like a child. So yeah, it's spot on. You're right.
Yeah.
So how does your fire career progress?
The first fire station I was posted at was not the best one for me. Having grown up in London, in a very multicultural area, I was sort of expecting to be stationed somewhere near to where I lived, which is very central. And I was stationed right out west in an area I'd never been to, a part of London I'd never seen before. I'd had no reason to go to West London at any point. And I appreciate what I'm about to say sounds ridiculous to Americans because you live in a huge country. But for me, those like 15 miles, those 15 miles away in London is huge when you consider the amount of people you've got packed into such a small area. London's got about 14 million people in it.
Yeah.
And it's probably only about 9 miles across. It's huge. And this part of London that I went to, my first station, it was, the firefighters that worked there were all towards the end of their careers. They were all great white guys. They'd all been born in that area, grew up in that area, worked that area at the fire station. And they weren't my people. They were, some of them were quite racist. They were certainly homophobic. They were anti-women being firefighters. And it didn't sit well with me because none of those things represent what I did. And so to go back to the chameleon thing, I found it very difficult to chameleon, because to blend into that environment is an environment I don't want to blend into. So I didn't want to chameleon, which meant I stuck out like a sore thumb. And within a year, I'd had several arguments with the firefighters that worked there because I was listening to things they were saying and I was not liking them, making racist remarks, sexist remarks, homophobic comments. And I was like, do you know what? I'm not willing to chameleon here. I'm not willing to put up with this. And I'm certainly not going to not challenge it, because that goes against everything that I stand for.
Yeah,
I started challenging.
I was going to say to chameleon in that spot is to tacitly accept what's being said and to acquiesce and to actually be in agreement with it.
Exactly that. I think it was Desmond Tutu that said, if you stand silent in the face of oppression, you join the side of the oppressor.
Yes.
So, and I wasn't willing to do that. So yeah, I had, after the first sort of 4 months where I just had to keep my mouth shut while I was getting my feet under the table, I then started to challenge behaviors, started to call people out. And what that meant was you become ostracized from the watch very quickly, because you walk into a room and they stop talking. Someone laughs at something and you laugh, what are you laughing? Oh, nothing. And I'm like, oh. And I didn't even care that much, because I thought, this isn't my environment anyway. So the sooner I get out of it, the better. But because I was a rookie, it's very difficult to move within that first year. They don't like you to move. You get put on like an NVQ scheme. So for the first sort of 12 to 36 months, you're completing an NVQ, like an educational program in firefighting. And so they don't like you to move because they like you to have consistency.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't go into the details, it's not that relevant, but I engineered a situation where one of the other guys punched me in the face. I basically irritated him to the point where he lost it and punched me. And I went down and saw the governor, my firehouse chief, and I just said, he just punched me in the face. So we can either file a complaint, discipline him, he'll probably be sacked and he'll probably lose his pension, or you can move me. And he was like, you crafty little git.
Yeah.
So he said, right, where do you want to go? So I just said, I want to go back to my town. I want to go back to central London. So they moved me to Knightsbridge in central London. And that's when I would say my career really started. Knightsbridge fire station was incredible. It was such a good fire station. Good watch, good bunch of guys. And, I'm driving around Buckingham Palace and areas like that. It's insanely congested with traffic and on tiny streets, and you're driving a 12-ton fire engine.
Right.
It was brilliant fun, like wrong side of the road, contraflow bus lane. And everywhere you went, you're just being videoed and photographed, and all of this sounds really like vain, I suppose. But and to a point, I guess it was. I loved it. I loved getting off a fire engine, being overtly aware that people around you are already filming you. You do your what we call in London the backdraft phase.
Right.
from the film.
Yes.
You'd be like chin strap undone. You're set over one shoulder, sort of looking around. You've got no reason to be looking around, but you're doing it so they get a good shot.
Yeah, it looks good on camera. That's the reason you have to take a look around.
100%, yeah. But I absolutely loved it. There was such a buzz uptown, and it was busy, really busy, as you can imagine. So I learned so much. We went to some great, you'll understand, great fires, obviously. That's objective, depending on what side of the nozzle you're on. but yeah, it was just busy and it was good fun and it was a good buzz. And I stayed there for a long time. And then eventually moved to Battersea, which is only a couple of miles away from Knightsbridge, slightly more south of the River Thames. So just outside of the main sort of area of the capital. But that was the area I'd grown up in. So I'm now in a position where I'm serving an area that I frequented as a kid. And that was always, had an inherent romance attached to it. I'd be going to buildings that I'd been in and, traveling on the train networks that I'd grown up traveling on to get to work, and taking the fire engine to incidents at the train stations that I used to travel on. And I'd see people I knew all the time. It was a nice place to be.
Yeah, there's a certain comfort to it.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. It felt like coming home,
Right.
It felt like, I've gone full circle. Not only have I achieved my childhood dream, but I'm now looking after the people I care about the most. How incredible is that?
Yeah, I mean, not many people get to do that.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And so my time at Battersea was brilliant. It was great. Obviously, as we know, we go to traumatic incidents all the time. And the phrase that I coined, or that I guess I came up with after the Grenfell Tower fire, which we'll probably be arriving at shortly, was firefighters leave incidents, the incidents don't leave us. And I guess that had been true up to this point. I just hadn't realized it. We'd been out to, as you do, you go out to loads of trauma situations, and it's exciting on the way there and it's somber on the way back, particularly if things haven't gone well. But the way the fire world works is that you just get on with it. And sometimes you'll talk about things, sometimes you won't. And I think there was always enough time between the serious incidents that I would have done enough healing that I was okay. And the analogy I use to describe this is what I call a trauma jug. So if you imagine as a vessel, we are all vessels, human beings, we're a jug. And so this jug has a finite capacity, has a limited capacity to fill up. And trauma is water. So if you put that jug under the tap and you turn the tap on, that's us going to an instant, that's us taking some trauma on, and it fills that jug up a bit. Now, if at some point you don't pour some of that water out into somebody else's cup or glass, or pour some of it down the sink, that jug fills up and it overflows. And whilst I didn't realize this at the time, what I was doing by talking to people, talking to my friends about incidents, talking to firefighters about incidents, that was me tilling that jug every now and then and tipping a bit of that water out. So whilst I'd absorbed this trauma, I didn't realize that all of that was going on behind the surface. And then the Grenfell Tower fire happened, and it was the equivalent of that jug being put underneath the tap being turned on full, and then the jug being smashed in half. And I just absolutely fell apart.
Well, let's set the stage for that. Explain what Grenfell was.
Grenfell Tower fire was the most fatal fire the UK has had since World War II. It was a tower block that had been refurbished at the rich local residents' request because they deemed this building had a lot of social housing in it, an eyesore. They said it was an ugly building and they wanted it refurbished. Now, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea is one of the richest places in the world, to put it into perspective. Houses sell for £70 million. It's insane, the money that is there. And these rich people had said that the Grenfell Tower was an eyesore. It's a 24-story tower block, and it was an eyesore, and they wanted it refurbished. So
now, was the tower in the same neighborhood? And
it was in that area. Yeah.
What's the proximity to those mansions, those $17 million homes?
Oh, across the road.
Okay.
It's London's one of those really weird places where one side of the street you can have houses that you'll never be able to afford, and the other side you've got houses you'll never want to live in.
Right.
It's a really weird sort of mix of kind of like how I'm led to believe Washington DC is.
There are definitely some neighborhoods in DC like that, where you've got the row homes that are refurbished and gentrified, and it's Yeah. They're millions of dollars or a few million for a home. And then right around the corner is going to be squatters.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. And it's no different in this area. Although I do just want to point out that is doing the people that lived in Grenfell Tower a disservice, because as a community, they're incredible. And we're not talking about vagrants and people that are no good in society. We're talking about good people that have had a hard life, a lot of immigration, people that have escaped war-torn countries, people that have escaped oppressive regimes and come to the UK for a better life that should have been safe. And instead they were housed in a death trap of a building.
So the rich in the neighborhood wanting that eyesore to be taken care of, that leads directly to what happened, correct?
Yes. So the building was covered in a cladding material. Now it's called ACM, aluminium composite material. So it's basically aluminium sheeting with big foam sort of squares fixed onto the back that then get fixed onto the outside of the concrete tower block. And then they all sort of go together. Now what you effectively have, because the foam on the back of this is a very simple sort of perspective, but because the foam on the back, the foam rectangles on the back of these panels don't go to the edge of the panel, what you have is an overlap section where the two panels meet each other. And just behind that meeting, you've effectively got rows and rows and rows of chimneys. You've got rows and rows and rows of
just vertical space.
Yeah, vertical space and horizontal space where the panels meet to look nice. So it looks like a complete fascia, but behind it, there are all of these channels. And then this foam material fixed onto the back. Now, when a fire started due to a faulty refrigerator on the 4th floor, it was pushed up against a window. The curtains caught fire. It was summer. So those curtains then set light to this highly combustible cladding that had been fixed to the outside of the building and started a chain reaction of these panels failing. So the fire began to spread rapidly up the outside of the building. That then meant that not only was the fire spreading externally, it was not only just spreading vertically, it was also spreading horizontally. And that was a way that it breached from one compartment to the next. So when you look at compartmental firefighting, we have a stay-put policy in the UK where, because these tower blocks are solid, a series of solid concrete rooms, the fire cannot get from one to the other. Yeah, once everything in that flat, everything in that apartment has been used, it burned. There's nothing left. Yeah. There's nowhere for the fire to go.
Essentially, each apartment is a bunker.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. And then the fire can't spread anywhere. What happened when they refurbished this building is they drilled from one compartment to the next inside. And then to save money or because they were irresponsible or whatever, they then didn't put in intumescent foaming, fireproofing, all of the things that are supposed to go in. So they breached every single concrete bunker internally and then breached it externally with this cladding that was later described in the inquiry as solid petrol.
Yeah. So, I mean, they created every passageway you could think of to take away any kind of safety.
Yep. And then they didn't maintain any of the fire suppression systems that operate in the building. Simple things like fire doors. Residents were emailing the council saying, our door's fallen off. It's broken, it's damaged, whatever. We need a new door. And the local council just ignored them. So what those people then did, the people that fire doors, no doubt, bought their own fire doors at the cost of probably £500 to have it bought and fitted and installed. But a lot of people that lived in there didn't have £500.
Yeah.
So they went to a local equivalent Home Depot store and they bought a regular internal door and fitted it to the outside of their flat.
Right.
So when that fire spread internally, it just burned straight through it.
Right.
Within minutes. And so there was also smoke vents fitted in what should have been a protective stairwell so that people could get onto that stairwell and get out of the building in the event of a fire. Those smoke vents weren't maintained properly. They failed on every single floor without fail. Like, that is some level of apathy towards the safety of the people that live in that building when every single one fails.
Right.
That's disgusting. That is just a complete, we don't care. Yeah, when they refitted the emergency lighting in the stairwells, they fitted the lighting over the floor numbers on every single floor. So that when we're traveling through to try and get up to where we need to get up to, we can't read the floor numbers. We don't know what floor we're on. So we have to come off as firefighters with no water, with a section of rolled hose, and enforcing a battering ram for the door, the nozzle, a thermal imaging camera, plus the weight of our BA sets and our fire gear, probably made about, I'm going to go with probably about 70 pounds each of additional weight on top of our body weight. And we're carrying that through these very arduous circumstances. And we have to come off the stairwell onto fire floors to search for door numbers, braille fashion, through the back of our leather gloves, to try and then do a quick sum. Right, okay, there's 6 flats per floor. This is flat number 78. So what floor am I on? And then go back onto the stairwell and continue going up and try and count the stairs.
Yeah. All under fire conditions.
All in fire conditions, all in 300-400 degree heat. With radio messages going off, with firefighters all over the place, with hose, people screaming. It was absolute utter carnage.
So at what point do you arrive on scene?
We got the call from our fire station at around, I think it was just after midnight or about 1:45 potentially in the morning. And what was unusual about this is, as you all know, it out fire station, the bells go down. For anyone who's not in the services listening to this, we have a turnout time in London of 60 seconds. So I will be in bed asleep in my pants, and within 60 seconds, I will be up, dressed, down the pole, into the watch room, look at what we've got, where we go in, plan a route on the map, tear the sheet off, shout to the lads what we got, jump on the fire engine, and drive the fire engine out the front of the station, knowing where I'm going within 60 seconds. What was unusual about the night of the Grenfell Tower fire was when I got to the watch room, that call sheet was still printing because of the amount of trucks that were going on it, because of the amount of information that was on it. So that was the first thing. I realized a lot of fire engines are going, and it's a tower block fire. So that means we've definitely got something. This is not going to be a false alarm call. This is going well. So we jumped on the truck, started making our way there. Now, again, in London, we have a thing called FSG, Fire Survival Guidance Call. What that means is if somebody is in a fire situation and they can't self-rescue, but they are now being affected by the conditions of the fire, they will phone 999. Our control operator will then say, okay, what's the situation? What's going on? Get all the relevant information from them. If they then ask them, are you affected by the conditions of the fire? And they say yes. They will then be asked, can you get yourself to a place of safety? And if they say no, they then become a fire survival guidance call. It means they are now on the phone to that operator until they're either rescued or dead. And that operator will give them all the advice they need to survive that situation until a firefighter arrives.
And that operator will also listen to everything.
Everything. Now, the radio message I got about 2 minutes after leaving the fire station was there are now 156 fire survival guidance calls in progress.
Ooh.
There are only 120 flats at Grenfell Tower,
So
which tells me that
people calling
families
from
separated.
from separate rooms in same apartments.
100 times.
Ooh.
There are families separated. And when you think about what that actually means, how horrific is that if you're a parent and your child is in another room and they've phoned the fire brigade and you can't get to them? And when you consider 72 people died, 17 of those were children. Some of those were babies. Imagine being a parent in that situation.
No, you can't imagine it.
It's horrific.
No, yeah, nobody, you don't even want to put yourself in that position where you have to imagine.
No. But we knew from the outset that this was going to be a hell of a job. We knew that it was going to be a very difficult night and that people were almost certainly going to die. We knew that from the outset because we don't have the resources, nobody does, to be able to deal with that scale of disaster. So when we arrived, I could see fire from the 4th floor to the 24th floor in a sort of a triangular burn pattern, then halfway back down the building again on the outside of the building. And for anyone that wants to, if you Google the Grenfell Tower fire and you look at some of the photos, some of the early photos of the event that night, you will look at that burn pattern and go, it looks intentional. It looks like when you see in the film, you're like Zorro, you've got a Z, like it's kind of like that. You look and you go, well, that can't be a mistake. Fire doesn't burn that way.
Right.
And yet there it is. So when you turn up as a firefighter and you see that, it's confusing. You're going, this is not a regular burn pattern. There aren't a collection of 3 or 4 windows in a block that are all on fire because the fire's spread internally or because it's engulfed an entire flat, or even sometimes with the right wind conditions, especially on a tall building, the fire can tornado up. It can whip up and set light to a flat above it or next to it, but not one that is 15 stories further up and 5 flats across.
Mm-hmm.
How's that one on fire?
Yeah. That would be the first thing that goes through your mind. This is intentionally set.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we looked at that, we're like, okay, there were people in windows already. There were people spilling out the building. I grabbed my BA set and I ran into the lobby area of the building. And the very first thing I was confronted by were 2 young girls being carried out unconscious on their backs by 2 firefighters, clearly dead. But looked about 11 and 9, give or take. Black soot coming out their nostrils, black soot out the corners of their mouths, not breathing.
Right.
Now, they thankfully were both resuscitated outside the building, I was told. But when you walk into a lobby area and you join a queue of firefighters and you're waiting to go up into that scenario, and that's what you're greeted with, you're like, right, okay, this is shit.
It definitely puts your mind at a certain mindset.
It does, yeah. It puts you into a hyper-focused state, but it also puts you into a state of fear because, as I said, and the reason I said it at the start of this, we are just human beings.
Yeah.
We are not the superhuman people that sometimes people think that we are. I was scared. I wanted to go in and I didn't want to go in exact equal measures,
Oh yeah.
I had a 3-year-old son. I'm like, this is why I joined this job. This is why I'm here. This is my purpose in life, to be here, to help some of these people. I didn't expect to feel scared when that moment arrived on such a grand scale,
I think in some cases, well, not in some cases, I think I would question if you didn't feel scared.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. But up until that point, I've always felt very in control.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's the difference here. I've gone into a fire. I'm a good firefighter. You can stick me in a room where the flames are rolling across the ceiling. It's 600 degrees Celsius. And I'm looking and I'm going, yeah, this is fun. This is where I want to be in life. On my knees, feeling my neck burning a little bit and going, holy shit, like this is great. Because I'm in control of that room. I know how that fire's burning. I know how it's going to react. I know how much water to use. And it's exciting. It's exhilarating. This didn't feel like that. This felt like it was out of control. This felt like I had very little control over the situation. And it felt like I was going to have very little ability to positively influence the outcome. This was going to be as much about chance and luck as it was about firefighting skill, because the building was already lost.
I was going to say, in a normal fire, quote unquote, normal fire, you have that fire behavior and the predictability is there. In that fire, you guys lost predictability from the get-go.
It wasn't there.
Right.
It didn't even, at no point did the predictability exist. The crews that were there early on actually reported putting the fire out. They radioed down to the chief and they said, the fire's out, blah, blah, blah. And the chief said, you might want to check that, mate, because I'm still looking at it. And they were like, well, we're in flat 4. We're in the flat on the 4th floor. the fire's out, like we've checked. And they said, stick your head out the window. So the window that they just put the fire out on where the fridge was, they'd moved and they looked out and the fire's 3 floors up.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my God. So they ran out and they've sent crews up another couple of floors. And by the time they've done that, it's another 5 floors up. We were chasing our tails.
Yeah.
So my first job, so there I am in the lobby, these 2 girls have been carried out, and there was a crew of 3 firefighters, and the 3rd firefighter looked me dead in the eyes and said to me, be careful in there. And that, I still find it chilling because firefighters don't say that to each other.
No.
You know to be careful in a fire.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
but like, you're an idiot if you're not careful in a fire.
Right.
But he really meant it. And I remember it really hitting me, and I was thinking, oh, okay, this is not normal. This is not a normal fire. So my first task at that point was, I was told there is a guy on an FSG call, Fire Survival Guidance. So I know I'm his only chance. On the 15th floor, I'm going in on the 3rd. You have no water. You're going to have a length of rolled hose. So no way of dealing with fire gases that I'm going to be walking through. No way of dealing with any fires that I come across on my way up there. 20 kg and 44 pound kg and 44 pound backdoor battering ram. So I'm trying to convert things, but the nozzle, our BA sets, and like I said, probably about 70 pounds worth of additional weight each, myself and my colleague. And obviously I know that all of my procedures that I've been taught over at this point, I think I've been in for 13 years. Everything that I've been taught was you do not go onto a fire floor without knowing you've got working water.
Exactly.
You do not ever go above a fire floor for any reason.
Right.
And yet I'm being told you're going to go 11 floors through fire with no water. And we're not only saying to you to do that, but we're also saying to you, when you get to the 15th floor, we don't know if you can get water.
Right.
We don't know if it's going to be there for you because we have, I assume similar procedures are the same over where you are, but we have things called dry risers, like internal drain pipes, effectively we charge from the outside. Yeah. So we don't know, they're being used on many floors already. And as you know, what that does to the water pressure, it drops it. So even if it's working, because if it's been maintained properly, and there was a high chance it wouldn't have been in this block, because look at the apathetic approach they'd already had towards all of the bigger things. Even if it's working, that supply could be severely overrun on other floors. So I'm not going to have water when I get there. So we start making our way up. And as I said, we encountered problems with the lighting situation, not knowing what floor number we're on. The hose had spilled out. Like the way we have it, it isn't sort of folded like you guys have. We have the hose. If you imagine a belt and you fold it in half and then you roll it up from the middle to the 2 open ends. That's how we roll our hose in London. So that you can hold the 2 open ends, bowl it out, and it just rolls out. You've got both ends, one to plug in and one to stick your nozzle up, right? Yep. So the middle of that sort of filled out like a walnut whip. So now one of us has got a bundle of this knotted hose in one hand. The other one's got a bundle of this in their hands. We've still got all the other equipment. We're lost. It was bad. And on top of all of this, when we were told you're going to the 15th floor, we have 2 types of breathing apparatus sets in London: EDBA, SDBA, extended duration, standard duration.
Okay.
Standard duration in those circumstances will probably give us about, working hard, 22, 24 minutes worth of air. I've got to go to the 15th floor, rescue someone and get them out in 22 minutes.
Yeah.
I knew from the second they told us we were going to the 15th that we didn't have enough air. And so again, you're in that weird position where you're like, I'm being asked to do something at great personal risk and that I already know is probably impossible. And then you go, okay, well, here we go.
Right.
And you start, because that's what you do. They were literally saying to you, you don't have to go.
Well, you go on autopilot at that point.
Of course.
You have to.
Yeah. This is my job. This is what I've signed up for. And that doesn't mean you don't think about things. I did think about my son. certainly halfway up when things were going wrong at a rate of knots, that one thing after the other was going wrong. And I'm thinking, am I going to get out of this? And to be honest with you, I genuinely did think I'm going to die in this building. There was a definite point where I thought I'm going to die in this building. And
I think
it just got worse and worse.
You naturally have to think that.
Yeah, of course. And you're thinking about your training, you've got all the right equipment, but your options are being removed one after the other very, very quickly as the minutes tick on. Your options, your ability to respond to a change in circumstances is getting less and less the higher up you go in that building. And we made it to the 15th floor. We got there with this tangled hose, and straight away I could feel my neck burning. I could feel my wrists burning through the fire gear. And I was like, it is hot up here. It is really hot up here. So I did a quick temperature check with the thermal imaging camera, and it was 550 degrees Celsius. I knew that we didn't have long under those conditions unless we could cool that area down, and we didn't have water. So I sent my colleague to the dry riser with one end of the hose and said, get it plugged in, give it a quick open and check to see if we've got water. I'm going to start untangling the hose from this end. So with no visibility, I'm kneeling down, trying not to focus on how much I'm starting to burn, and passing the hose through loop after loop, as to try and untangle this like a knotted necklace. And then I realized that it was utterly silent. The radio had stopped working. I couldn't hear screaming. No one was shouting anymore. You could just hear a faint crackle. I realized that we were probably the two firefighters that were highest up in the building at that time. It feels very lonely suddenly. It feels very lonely. And as I thought that, as I'm untangling this hose, my emergency whistle goes off on my BA set to tell me that I should already be out the building.
Exactly.
So I don't know what you guys have here. We have like it gives you between sort of 8 to 12 minutes
right
from the point of whistle to when you're sucking your mask onto your face. Mm-hmm. I'm on the 15th floor, still haven't started the rescue, still don't have water, and I'm burning. And I thought, die.
Right.
And so then I thought, right, it's okay. We've got an auxiliary hose. I can plug that, as in on the BA set. I can plug that into Leon's set, my colleague. I'll plug into him and I'll supplement his air if I run ill. I can supplement him right on cue in the distance. I heard his whistle go.
I was going to say, not keeping in mind that he's used just as much air as you have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought, we're screwed. And so Leon tested the thing. I'd untangled the hose. I tested the water. We had water. Somehow we had water, I think, because at this point, a lot of crews weren't successfully firefighting anymore. I don't think much water was actually being used. It was more about snatch rescues, grabbing people where you could and getting them out of the buildings, just dragging them out any way you can. So we had water. So I cooled the area down. I got it down. I seem to remember to around sort of 350 degrees Celsius. So it was more tolerable. It was, as you will know, at that point, it's then very hot, but your skin isn't burning anymore. And then Leon came back and we looked at each other and again, very low visibility. You're shouting through your BA masks. And we had a conversation about what we're going to do next. And we very quickly came to the decision that we're not going to try and rescue this guy. We said, we've got to leave him because we're all going to die.
Right.
And again, as you all know, the hierarchy of rescue, we call it in the UK, is the most important person in a fire is you. The second most important is your colleague. The third most important people are the rest of your colleagues. Then it becomes the people that aren't involved in the fire at all, the bystanders, because if they get involved, your job becomes harder. Right at the back of that queue is this person you're trying to rescue. They're the least important person because if any of that other stuff goes wrong, they die anyway.
Yeah, so they die anyway and somebody else dies as well.
Exactly. So you're at that point where you have to make you your priority. And so we had a very quick discussion where we decided not to rescue this guy. And that, alongside some other bits, which we might want to talk about, is what started the downfall in my mental health, the downward spiral in my mental health. So we literally bailed. We dropped our kit. We abandoned the hose. We said, we'll leave this here for the next crew to come up, naively thinking, obviously we're inside the building. We have very little idea of how it looks on the outside. We know what the conditions still like inside, but naively I thought, we'll get out. We've done the hard work. We've got the kit there. We'll just say, get someone up there now. The water's there. We've got water. It's fine. They can get up there and get this person out. And we ran out the building, like, you know, one hand on the banister of the stairwell, one hand on the wall, swinging our legs down, like jumping 5, 6, 7 steps at a time to get out of that building. And we got out with, and I don't mean to make this sound any more dramatic than it is, but we got out with seconds to spare. If we had had a longer conversation, we'd have been pulling our masks off on the way out. And we got outside. And when I got outside that building, we'd done our usual handover and stuff, told people what had gone on, all of those bits. I remember kneeling down on this grass bank, looking up at the tower and thinking, how can that look like that in 20 minutes from how it looked before? How can that be the same building? And it had just completely changed. And it was at that point I realized no one else was getting up to the 15th floor. That guy's going to die. No one else is going in there to that height. And that's what had happened. Procedures had changed, and it was about rescuing saving the savable life and not taking unnecessary risk to save lives that we now deemed unsavable. The heartbreaking part about that was you could still see those people in windows on the higher floors waving T-shirts and waving, you know, lights on the back of their mobile phones, asking for help, still expecting to be saved. And you knew that they weren't going to be.
Yeah. And all you can do is sit and watch.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that I talk about when I deliver mental health talks and stuff in schools and prisons and to different fire and rescue authorities now. I talk about that moment when I saw somebody sort of disappear from a window into a plume of smoke. And I thought, I've just watched someone die. And at this point, I've got my hands in a bucket of water, radial cooling. I'm exhausted. I'm still sort of getting over the fear of that last go. And I looked down to the tower and on the ground, I could see a queue of firefighters queuing to go in.
Mm.
And I realized that that's where I need to be. I need to be in that queue. And so I talk to people about rejoining the queue. When you've gone through adversity, you've faced fear, and you've been beaten, you have to get up. You have to change your air cylinder, and you have to rejoin the queue. You have to go back. You have to go back and do it again, because otherwise you're giving up, and you can't give up.
No, you can't. You definitely can't give up.
And so I went back into the building another 2 times that night, helped rescue other people. It was all rescues from lower floors.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
And then
at what floor did they say no? This is. Was there a cutoff?
I think at that point, and I don't know 100%, but I think at that point, the highest. Well, in that exact moment, I think it was pretty much sort of 13th, 12th, 11th, 10th down,
right,
that we were focusing on, because the conditions just, people were reporting leaving the protective stairwell onto a fire floor and immediately being face down on their bellies and having to retreat because of how hot it was. And bearing in mind, the fire's burning from the inside out, the outside in.
Yeah.
The bottom to the top and the top to the bottom. You're surrounded by radiated heat. That's 1,000 degrees. It's not survivable for a firefighter. You can't be in those conditions. It's not survivable for anybody.
In a normal fire, there's that space where you can find cool air or clean air. Not in that kind of fire.
No,
that's
not possible. And later on, like the third time I went in was much later on in the fire. And by that point, all the windows had gone. So the tower looked like a giant chimney.
Mm-hmm.
And it meant that obviously all of that radiated heat was no longer radiating in. It was escaping out the building with the smoke. So the heat, despite the fire looking worse, the heat was significantly less. And we went up as high as the 13th floor on my final wear. And it's just, the building was just, it was just piles of.
Do you find anybody surviving at that height at that point?
You couldn't even, well, I won't go into details on that front. But no, there was clearly no one surviving at that point.
So you go in 2 more times after the initial time, and you go up to the 13th. At what point did it decide this is done?
I think at that point, to be honest with you, it was about extinguishing the fire, not saving life. So it was a case of, I guess, where do we put the resources?
Mm-hmm.
Do we fight the fire on the lower floors and let the rest burn out because everybody that was alive isn't now? And so it kind of becomes and I'm speaking ignorantly here because I wasn't a part of the management meeting that decides all of this, but I would imagine they were looking at that building at that point and going, well, let's put out what we can with the resources we have. But bearing in mind the stairwell at this point is just a tangled mess of hose, and there's the buildings being flooded with water. All of the rising main had split, and so it's just flooding the building with water. We were going up on our 3rd wear, and as you know how dangerous this is, we were soaked through to our underwear in our fire gear because it was just a cascade of water coming down the internal stairwell. So when you get onto a fire floor, even though the heat wasn't that bad, like you're acutely aware of the fact that I'm going to get steam burns,
right? Because
my fire gets soaked. So I guess they were just focusing on the lower floors. It was a case of just double check everywhere that you can get to in case someone has survived. But we certainly didn't find anybody.
So how long do you stay there that night?
We were there I think we got there, I think it was about 1:45 that we got there, or just after 1 that we got there. And we were there until midday the next day.
Yeah.
Well, that same, so 12 hours.
Right.
We then had to go for a debrief because the fire service realized the huge loss of life that had taken place. So we went for a debrief at a fire station local to the tower, where they drafted some counsellors in and they were just pushing firefighters through, which the intention was lovely.
Yeah.
But in that moment, utterly pointless.
How many firefighters responded to the fire?
It was over 200.
Yeah. So
it's over 250.
So you're trying to get 250 people through, what do you want to call it? Meaningful debrief? That's almost impossible. Well, I mean, let's be honest. In a normal house fire, what do you have? I don't know how it works for you guys, but for us in a normal house fire, let's go with the affected firefighters. Let's go with 10, 12 to be affected, who have actually gone in and done something and been part of that, actively part of that call. The rest are there to help out in different capacities and different roles. It's almost impossible to get 10 to 15 people through or the effective debrief.
Yeah.
Let alone 250 who are overwhelmed with what they just witnessed and what they just took part in.
Yeah, exactly. It was, as I said, the intention was clear and it was a good intention. It was a nice intention, but it was completely impractical. And also, you don't know how you feel about that at that point. They're saying, how do you feel? I was like, I don't know. Ask me in 2 weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
Give me a chance to process what's happened.
I was going to say, I feel overwhelmed and I'm exhausted.
Yeah,
exactly. What I imagined a normal response would be. So,
yeah. I think.
Go ahead.
I think every firefighter's response generally in that situation was, I feel fine. No, I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah, your default setting. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind as well, this was like the immediate aftermath of the fire. I was asked to go back, as we spoke briefly at the start about my specialist role within the fire service as a technical rescue station. So I was asked to go back 2 days later on my 2 middle days off to help the police with body recovery as part of my urban search and rescue skill set. That was more damaging than the night of the fire to my mental health, because you're going back and you're looking at skeletons.
Mm-hmm.
And you're piecing together mechanism of death. You're looking at exactly what these people were doing and where they were in their final moments of life. And it broke my heart.
Yeah.
It just broke my heart to see to see adults and children in that situation, it's just hard. There's no other word for it. It's just heartbreaking. And that began a very steep decline in my mental health. Literally after that day, I started to fall apart.
Hey guys, quick break right here just to check in and thank each of you for listening to the show. Your support has been paramount, and I appreciate all of you. I have one request, though. I need you to share the show with everyone you know. Help me get the word out and spread these stories as far and as wide as we can. While you're at it, please leave a review of the show wherever you happen to listen. Feel free to reach out to me at any time to share your story, to talk, or to pass on suggestions. Let's get on with the rest of the show.
Yeah, I was gonna wonder how long it takes for that to start to affect you in that manner. And I would imagine in this case, it has to be pretty quickly.
I think it started straight away. And again, as I've said to people in the past, the problem with PTSD, which is what then started for me, the problem with that is if you've never had it before, you don't know what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been, there was no part in the fire service. At no point has anyone ever spoken to me in the fire service. Again, at that point, 13 years in, no one had ever said to me, PTSD is a thing, by the way. This might happen. These are the warning signs. This is how it manifests. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. No one had that chat with me. So I just started feeling really angry. Within a couple of weeks, I was crying constantly. I would just be okay, completely fine, watching TV. And then I'd feel this wave of emotion just surge up from the pit of my stomach and my eyes would just start crying. But sometimes I wouldn't even be crying. My eyes were, if that makes any sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like the emotion was coming out of me, even though I'm not actually sobbing,
Right.
And the anger I felt, not about the incident, just general anger that then existed within me permanently. It never went. The smallest thing would set off this explosive reaction within me, which led to, an incident I talk about is in the August. So 2 months after the fire, I went away on holiday with my partner, my then partner, my son, as I said, I think he just turned 4. And his birthday's the 4th of June. So yeah, he turned 4 10 days before the fire. And I was on holiday. There was a couple of other firefighters that had served with me at the fire at Grenfell and their families. And I was already starting to change how I reacted and my anger levels and all of that stuff. And there was this particular incident where we were sitting in a Spanish town square and my son wouldn't eat a chip. That's literally what set off this explosive reaction. He wouldn't eat a chip. And I grabbed him by his arms, dragged him out of his seat, slammed him down in the seat next to his mum and screamed with the most fearful voice I could find, the most angry voice, angry face. I screamed in his face, sit there then you little, and then use the C word to my 4-year-old son. And I will never forget the look of fear on his face that I had just created in him. And then everybody else at that table looked at me in complete stunned silence. And so I felt embarrassed. I felt immediately embarrassed. I also felt angry because they weren't being judged.
I was going to say, yeah, it compounds the anger.
Yeah. And so I jumped out of my seat and I stormed off. And my friend Dean, firefighter, was with me, followed me out, and we jumped in the car together that we'd hired, and I drove off around these Spanish mountains. Didn't really know where I was going. And he looked at me, and he'd seen enough by this point. This is like, a few days into the holiday. He said, Rick, if you don't get help, you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose your home, your wife, your partner, your child, and you're going to lose your job. You're going to lose everything. Because he'd already seen me at this point start drinking heavily, using cocaine. And I think 3 months after that conversation, he was right. 3 out of 4. I'd lost my home. I'd lost my son. I'd lost my girlfriend.
That was so rapid.
Yeah, it was rapid. And there are people out there that will say, why didn't your girlfriend stick by you? She couldn't.
Right.
I'd put her, and this is when you come full circle, I had put her in a position my stepdad had put my mum. I had put her in a position where she was looking at the protection of a child, not from physical violence, but from intolerance, from apathy. I didn't want to be around my son. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't feel love for him. I didn't want to treat him well. I was just angry, shouting all the time, shouting at her, shouting at him. She made the right call. She said, "You're gone. I choose my son." And I'm glad she did, because I would choose him any day over anybody. And so it was a quick decline, but I certainly don't blame her for it, because I was a nightmare to be around. And she wasn't the only person that left me. You know, my friends stopped inviting me out. People didn't want to be around me. The only people that wanted to be around me were the people that were happy to do the things I wanted to do, which was get drunk and get high. Waste days, you know, and it was only by miracle that I didn't lose my job, because I never got caught. But if I'd have ever been caught, that would have been gone as well. And so in the months after the fire, you know, my life was falling apart. And before she eventually said that I had to leave, I had a moment where I was talking about these tears and stuff coming up, and I had my sort of low point where I was at home on my own. I got off the couch and I'd walked across to the kitchen to get a glass of water, or in fairness, actually, that was probably a beer. And I kind of just collapsed onto the floor, not collapsed like physically, just gave up walking, just sort of slumped to the floor. And I sat there and I started crying, and I didn't stop. And I'm not joking, I was on the floor in that position for about 4 hours.
Right.
Just sobbing. Everything just came out of me, crying and crying and crying. And I realized in that moment that I was going to feel this sadness for the rest of my life. This is how it's going to feel for the rest of my life. This horrendously overwhelming feeling of sadness. And then I thought, well, if this is how I'm going to feel for the rest of my life, then I don't want to live the rest of my life. Because who would choose that? I'll kill myself. I'll just take my own life, because that's easier than feeling this pain. And it's really important that listeners realize at this point that this wasn't about self-worth and self-value. I didn't feel unloved. I didn't think that I wouldn't be missed. It wasn't about, oh, no one wants me, I'm rubbish, I'm going to kill myself. It was, it hurts too much to be alive. And that's the danger. That's the inherent danger with suicide, with people like me and from our backgrounds. It isn't about whether you think people love you. It's about how much you hurt inside. And when you hurt enough to not want to be alive, you're in real danger. Now, I'm very lucky that I have a close network of people. I'm very lucky that I had 20 people I could have called in that moment that would answer their phones. Even the people that have abandoned me, some of those would have answered their phones and gone, oh God, what's going on? And sometimes that's enough to stop you doing something stupid. And for me, that was enough. And I've got a very close relationship with my father and my mother, my mother. And I was very lucky that I could call them both. And bearing in mind, they were witnesses at this point to my demise as well. They were witnessing their son, who they loved, who's always been the life and soul of a party, who's always been happy. Like, I attacked life with such fervor, you know, I attacked life with such joy. And it was just broken, utterly, utterly broken. And they've watched me fall apart. And their hearts were breaking as well, because they couldn't help. There's nothing they could do. And I was lucky. I spoke to my dad in this particular moment, and he just said, you need help, Rick. I'd started the counseling process already by this point. He said, you need help, to go to the doctors. And again, when stars align, I phoned my GP, and in the UK, you can wait 2 weeks for a doctor's appointment. They said, we've just had a cancellation. If you can get here in 15 minutes, you can have an appointment now. I lived a 10-minute walk from the GP's. So I literally just put on my shoes and walked to the GP instantly. Walked in, tried to tell the doctor what was going on, burst into tears again, couldn't stop. And I remember just sitting there crying in front of this GP with no way of being able to get the words out that I needed to tell her what was wrong. And she just handed me a prescription for antidepressants and said, I think you have PTSD. And I remember feeling crushed at the thought of that, because I felt weak. I felt so weak and so useless and pointless. I'm the strong person. I'm the person that rescues other people. I'm the person that makes someone's bad day good. And now I'm the person that can't put her pants on in the morning. I'm the person that can't maintain a friendship. I'm the person that can't look after my son, that can't be left alone with my son. I can't be trusted to be left alone with my son. How far had I fallen? Well, as much as I was always antidepressants, the one thing I will say for anybody who feels the same way about them is I felt like I was stuck in a dark room with no doors and no windows, and there was no way out. There was no light coming in, and it was hopeless. When I started counseling, it felt like someone had cut a skylight into that room, and now some light was shining in, which means I can go, right, there's a way out of here. I can see the way out with my own eyes. But the skylight's out of reach. There's nothing else in the room. I've got no way of getting to that skylight, which is incredibly frustrating. Going on antidepressants was the equivalent of somebody lowering in a footstool and saying, now you can reach the skylight, which meant I still knew it would be hard. I'd still have to haul my body weight out of this hole in the ceiling. But there was a way of reaching the exit route. And that was pivotal in my recovery, because without the antidepressants, I probably wouldn't be here. And I wasn't on them for very long. I wasn't on them for as long as I should have been, because I didn't want to be on them. I wanted to find other ways to heal and get better. And there are some amazing herbal remedies like St. John's wort, which is a natural antidepressant, which I started to take instead of the drugs once I'd got better enough to sort of research was available, how they help you, because I didn't want to be on drugs. Because I figured that once you're on that form, where's the end? Well, how do you get off of them? Because when you stop taking them, all of your problems are still there. So antidepressants work, but only if you're going to go to therapy. Because you need to heal yourself whilst not killing yourself. All the antidepressants do is make you easier to be around for the people that want to give you love and care, and they stop you from killing yourself. Hopefully. The counseling, the therapy, that's what unscrews you. That's what heals you. So you have to do both.
So what kind of therapy did you do then?
Just regular therapy. I've since also, in fact, fairly recently had some hypnotherapy because I'm leaving the fire service soon.
Okay.
And I figured there may be some fallout from that. Leaving a career I've done for almost 20 years, there may be some fallout from that. So I've preemptively taken steps to make sure that I'm okay. And this kind of brings me into this process of, it's called mental health being the key word there. We worry about our physical health all the time. If we're ill, we see a doctor. We got a broken leg, we get an x-ray, we get our leg in plaster. If we want to stay fit and healthy, we go to a gym. We don't wait till we're fat, until we're obese and we can't breathe when we walk up a set of stairs before we go to the gym, or we shouldn't. What we do is we maintain what we have. I'm in shape, not because I need to be, but because I want to be. I'm in shape because I go to the gym. On the days I don't want to go to the gym, I go to the gym so that I don't get obese, so that I can walk up flights of stairs okay. We need to go to a mental health gym as well. We need to check in, and that's whatever it looks like for you, whether that's talking to a friend that you can open up to about anything and everything, whether it's talking to a colleague whether it's therapy and a trained professional, whether it's a partner. As it is for me now, sometimes it's my 10-year-old son. Sometimes me and him will sit down, we'll have a good mental health check-in day, and it's a beautiful thing because I've healed my relationship with my son now. I've taken parenting courses. I've revisited times when I've let him down and said, do you remember when I did this, Charlie? And he said, yeah. And I said, I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I was so rubbish. You deserved better. This is why that happened. Because that's important for him to know why. It wasn't because you're not worth loving. It wasn't because you did something wrong. It was because I failed. I failed as a parent and I failed as a human being. And there are reasons for that, but there are not excuses. I cannot excuse my behaviors because the bare minimum you deserved was to feel safe and to feel loved. And I removed them from you. And that's on me. That will always be on me. And I will own that. And I will revisit times that I've let you down. And I will say, when I did this, shouldn't have happened. And I'm sorry. And it's only because I've been brave enough to approach things that way with him that we now have a fantastic relationship. He loves me. He runs towards me and jumps up at me when I see him now. We play soccer together in the park. I attend his birthday parties. We do all of the father and son things that you should do. And we have the father and son relationship that you should have. And on top of all of that, he also knows that he has a dad that is flawed and isn't too proud to admit it, which sets a great example for him when he's moving forwards and growing up and becoming a man. I want him to have positive relationships with women. I don't want him to shut down and hide his emotions from them because he thinks that's what a man is. That's not what a man is. A man is someone who can stand up and go, I got that wrong. Sorry about that. A man is someone who can be strong and can be successful, but can also be weak and can also fail. And those days, whilst they're hard, are also okay. And it's vitally important that he grows up knowing that. And hopefully I'm getting that right.
Yeah, that's quite a process for anybody, for any parent, to have that recognition. It's not always inherent, and hopefully you learn it before you make the mistakes. But I know I've made my mistakes as a parent, and I've tried to have those conversations as well. And they're not easy conversations, especially with a 10-year-old.
They're not easy. I mean, I'm very lucky. My son is very intelligent. And I mean, to sum up who my son is, and I'm so proud of this, whilst it was very disconcerting in the moment, I'm so proud of him for this. We were sitting at home one day at my house and we were watching a film, and it's a film called Liar Liar, Jim Carrey.
Mm-hmm.
And he's this awful dad. You know, he fails to turn up for his son time and time and time again, lies to his son all the time because he's wrapped up in himself. And whilst his circumstances and my circumstances were obviously very, very different, the result was the same. I was letting my son down. And I'm watching this film and I looked at my son, Charlie, and I could see his mind was ticking over. And I thought, oh God, he can see some similarities here.
He recognizes.
So I paused the film and I was like, you all right, Charlie? I call him Chops. And that's my nickname for him. You all right, Chops? And he said, yeah. And I was like, do you think I'm like him? And he looked at me and he went, not now, you're not, Dad. I said, you were sometimes, but not now. And I was like, okay, well, at least I'm not now. And he could see it hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a bit teary because it's the worst thing for a dad to hear that you've failed to turn up for your son when he was expecting you. And so I got a bit teary and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said to me, if you're getting upset, Dad, we can talk about this some more later if you want. We don't have to talk about it now. And I was like, my God, my 10-year-old's getting me emotional. This is beautiful, but infuriating, but I thought, what a great job me and his mum are doing.
Right.
And me and his mum, by the way, for anyone out there that thinks a co-parenting situation isn't possible, nonsense. My son lives in the same house that I was kicked out of. He lived in that house with his mum and his stepdad. His stepdad is a wonderful man. He is a hard-working, good dad to my son. And I'm a friend of his. I go to that house and see my son sometimes to collect him, or sometimes I'll pop round for a coffee or a glass of wine. I will spend time with this man. And it's important for my son to see that example as well. Just because a relationship ends, it doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be brutal. It doesn't have to involve hatred. And the way you do that, for anyone wondering, is remove your pride, remove your ego from the situation and make it about what it's about. It's about your child. And if you love your child, make it work. You don't have to like the person that you've split up with anymore to do the best thing for your son. If your priority is your son and not your hurt ego, then you can do that. Does it hurt sometimes when I go around him and I see my beautiful home that I used to live in, when I'm living in a house share with 43 other strangers? Yeah, it does hurt. It's hard. You look around at what you had and you look at what you've got and you go, Jesus, I've lost a lot, but I've gained a lot as well. And me losing that stuff is partly down to circumstance, partly down to my choices. And my choices I am solely responsible for, because even when the choices and options were rubbish, I still picked the worst ones. That's on me. That's on me. That's not Nathan's fault. Nathan's his stepdad. That's not Nathan's fault that I made crappy choices. Why should he be punished? It's not Jo, Charlie's mum. It's not her fault I made crappy choices. Why should she be punished? And it's certainly not Charlie's fault. So we have a great family setup. Sometimes Charlie has a stepbrother now. So, so many similarities between Charlie's life and my life as kids. And even around the same age as, he was 4, I was 3 when his parents split up. I've gone out of my way after I realized I'd become my stepdad to no longer be him. I made that choice, and it was confronting to find out I'd become him. The realization that I'd become him was confronting. That was hard. I'd become the person I hated most as a child. That's hard. But you have a choice. You can carry on being that person, or you can be better. You can do better. You can fight hard and work hard to be better. And that's what I'm doing. And it is continuous work. There are still days when I fail, where I feel rubbish, where I look at what I've lost and I feel sorry for myself. So I have what I call a wallow day. Okay, I'm going to sit in bed today. I'm going to sit around in my pants and watch TV. That's what I'm going to do today. And I'm going to be a miserable git, but I'm going to tell people that's what I'm doing. I'm going to message my ex-partner and say, in case you're trying to get hold of me today for Charlie, I'm about, but I'm not going to be checking my phone regularly. So cool, because I'm having a wallow day. And she'll go, yep, cheers for letting us know. I'll tell my girlfriend I have now, I'll say to her, I don't want to see anyone today, babe. I'm having a crap day. And she'll go, do you need anything? And I go, no. And she'll say, okay. And the analogy I use for this is the broken vase. So the partner I have now, Jenny, I've been with her for about 10 months. We were having a conversation one day where she said something to me that caught me off guard. And it's not often someone says something about me anymore that catches me off guard, because I feel like I'm so in tune with who I am and what I'm about and quite open with it all. And she basically intimated in the conversation that there are concerns for her that I will relapse one day. I will, something will happen and I'll break again.
Right.
And I found it so crushing that somebody who didn't even know I existed when Grenfell happened, now has that, but I burdened her with that. I burdened her with, I might break, and that's going to be for you to pick up those pieces. And I realized that once you've had PTSD, you will always be viewed as a broken vase that's been glued back together. There you are. You're still a vase. You're still functional. You still work. You still hold flowers. Great. Everyone can see your scars. Everyone can see that you've broken. And some people will worry that if they knock you, you'll break again. And I hated that realization. That's how fragile I am. That's pathetic. I don't want to go through life with people seeing that. And she said the most beautiful thing to me. She said, but do you know what people actually see, Rick? They see that you've been broken and they see that you found a way to put yourself back together. So everyone that's important to you in your life that can see that broken vase knows that if you do get knocked and a bit of you falls off, you've got the glue, you know where the piece is, and you can just put it back together. And all we have to do is help you find that broken piece. All we have to do is support you, tell you you've got this, and empower you to heal yourself again. And in actual fact, when you look at that, you go, wow, a fixed vase, you've got no idea how to put itself back together again. If they get knocked, they're screwed. They'll fall apart like I did. I'm ahead of the game.
I was going to relate that to that. I don't know. I've seen it somewhere and I was going to look it up really quick, but the Japanese art and it.
Yes, exactly that.
I forgot the name of it, but it's just that, is taking that, breaking it, put it all back together with
and they
glue.
do it with like gold leaf.
Exactly. Make it almost a more beautiful product than it was before it was broken.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's, well, as I've come to learn now in telling this story and talking as openly as I do, in these mental health lectures and stuff that I give now, it's, you have so much strength when you can turn around to someone and go, yes, I was broken, but this is how I am now. This is who I am now. And demonstrate that you can put yourself back together. It's great. My girlfriend doesn't worry about me falling apart. She doesn't worry about it. She's aware that it might happen, but she's also completely happy and satisfied that I won't fall apart like I did before. It'll be, oh, something's happened. That's affected me. I had a death at work a couple of days ago. We performed resus on someone. It was unsuccessful. They died. So I'm fully aware now that over the next couple of weeks, there's a chance that might affect me in some way. At the moment, I don't feel like it has. We did everything we could. We were a smooth team. We got there quick. We did everything we needed to do. It was just unsuccessful. He was not going to survive. But in that moment, I go, right. So over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to monitor my drinking habits, my eating habits, my sleeping habits. And I'm going to make sure that they are the right habits. If at 10 a.m. I think, oh, I really fancy a beer. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to check in with myself. Why do I fancy a beer at 10 a.m.? What am I numbing? What am I trying to get away from? If anything, like, why has that thought crept in? So I'll do things like I'll make sure I drink more water. I'll make sure that my eating habits over the next couple of weeks are on point, because the link between your gut health and your mental health are scientifically proven.
Yeah, it's
So if you
undeniable.
eat rubbish food, pardon?
It's undeniable.
Yeah. So if you eat rubbish food, you will feel more rubbish. It's that simple. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to be eating a lot of chicken and rice, a lot of vegetables, keep myself in the gym. I'm going to check in with myself. I'm going to go, right, I'm going to take control of a potential situation, much the same as I would as a firefighter, practically. You don't go into a fire and go, oh, I'm going to sit here and worry that the fire's going to get bigger, and when it's too big to deal with, I'll start tackling it. You don't. You go and you go, right, small fire, great, let's put it out quickly.
Right. So let's talk about what you're doing with the talks. You say you talk to firehouses, to prisons, to schools. How's that working for you? And what are you doing when you go in there?
A lot of people, if you look at keynote speakers, motivational speakers, the general theme is that there's an amazing story and that there is an inherent point for that story. So there's a key learning point that at the end, everyone goes, oh, that's really impacted me. And that's great. I guess I have a continuous series of points, key learning points throughout my talk. And what I will do is I will ask a client, what do you want your audience to get out of this talk? What are the takeaway points? Why are you booking me? Because I want to hit my brief. And then all I do is I will tell my story, much as I have with you today, and I will highlight the relevant points to the key learning outcomes that they have. So if it's about resilience, I will focus more on my mental health journey post-fire and all of the things that I learned that helped me, all of the things that I got wrong that didn't. So there's a cautionary tale in there. What can happen when you get it wrong? What it feels like when you get it wrong. And I try and connect feelings and actions as much as I can, because if you're talking in a corporate environment, I'm standing up telling this story to a room full of office people that have never worked for an emergency service or even seen a dead person. There's not much they're going to connect with in my story. They can be like, oh my God, that sounds awful. It means nothing to me. I'm on a laptop every day. But they have all felt sad. They have all felt angry. They have all felt insecure. So what I will do is I'll pick up on the feelings that I got from my situation and talk about how those feelings affected me. I changed in my life to change the effect those feelings had on me, which then makes my story relatable to anybody. And it means that someone could be sitting there from an office environment and they could be going, this is in no way relevant to me whatsoever. And then I talk about how I felt when I let my son down. And there might be how they felt when they were supposed to go to lunch with their mum and let her down because they'd gone out the night before and got smashed and, cancelled and made up a lie about it. And that might be, that might be something they've been beating themselves up about for a couple of weeks because that's the worst thing that's happened to them. And trauma is relative, right?
Right.
Trauma doesn't have to be someone dying. Trauma could be a relationship breakdown. Trauma could be witnessing something happen to somebody else. Trauma could be so many different things. It's literally just about how that thing affects you and what emotional response it draws out of you. So when you reclassify trauma from, I think what traditionally a lot of people think it is, which they always think of this big event, it could be a collection of really small events that seemingly as individual events feel like nothing, but collectively they're all a big thing. So I will go into these environments and I will tell my story and I will bring some awareness about mental health, specifically when it comes to men, because we have a tendency to keep things to ourselves, not open up because we think talking about emotional stuff is weak or feminine or, and so we don't want to talk about those things. And then we suffer and we struggle. And when we start suffering and struggling, guess what? We feel weak because now we're struggling. Now we're failing. Now we're not succeeding. And then because we feel weak, we feel weaker because now we're suffering from weakness. And it literally becomes a downward spiral until you get to that point that I got to, and like many, many other men have got to, where you realize it hurts too much to carry on. Those things we all carry, the title of your podcast, when you carry too many of those things, they weigh you down. There's a beautiful Disney short, like in film that Disney put together, and it's absolutely stunning. And I think I won't say what I think the intention of the film is. I'll just very briefly tell you what happens. There's a dad and a son. No mum in the picture, you don't know why. Dad and the son. The son takes this kid's very young, takes the kid outside. When the kid gets happy, he floats. Because the kid floats and no other kids float, these other parents are looking and trying to keep their kids away from this kid. Oh my God, it's a floating kid. It's weird. Let's keep him away. So the dad feels embarrassed by his kid because his kid floats. So he locks the kid away in the house. They never go out. And he gets to the point where the kid has to go out. Obviously, he's grown a little bit older. He's got to go out now. So he takes the kid out, he puts his little rucksack on him, and he puts a rock in. The dad puts a rock in the rucksack to keep the kid on the floor. So when that kid gets happy, he can't float. But the kid's happiness supersedes the weight of that rock until he starts to float again. So the dad puts another rock in the rucksack. And as this film goes on, the dad's putting more and more rocks in the rucksack. And it has nothing to do with how the kid feels. It's to do with how he feels about the kid. It's to do with how he feels when people look at his child as something that's different. The outcome of the film is that this kid slips the rucksack and runs into a park, like a swing park, play park. And he's on a swing and then he starts floating. And a few parents noticed and the dad runs in, grabs the kids and drags the kid to the floor and screams in the kid's face, "What's wrong with you?" And the kid starts to cry. And then the dad realizes that now people are staring at him, not the kid. And the end of the film is him happily letting his kid be who he is, happily letting the kid float around the park, pushing him on the swings, having fun. And he realizes the more he allows his kid to float, the less the kid needs to.
What's the name of them?
They're Disney short. I can't remember the name of that one, but if you Google Disney short, there's about 8 or 9 of them, I think, and they are all equally as beautiful. I mean, there's one called Alban, and they're just stunning.
I've seen one called Bow.
Yes.
Yes.
The one that's about the bow bun. Yeah. So it's those those same things. That's a beautiful one about letting go of your children. Isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. The dumpling.
But that honestly, when my ex sent me the kid with the rucksack one, and I'm not going to lie to you, it absolutely broke me when I watched that. Because, you know what, I was that dad. You know, I was that dad screaming at my child because I was losing the plot. Not because my kid was different, but because I was. The reasons for it were different, but I was still weighing him down. I was still burdening him with my stuff.
Right. Which is very prevalent in society. As obviously we all do it, and it's what you want to prevent, but you don't, sometimes you don't even realize it until you look and you go, oh shit, I did that. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's, here I sit at 54 years old and my kids are grown and have kids of their own. And I look and I go, I did that. And now I have to make amends there and here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, the beautiful thing about that, and I think this is a thing that a lot of people don't consider really, you can revisit those moments with your children. It doesn't matter whether they're grown up and they've got kids. You can go, do you know what I was thinking about the other day? I was recording a podcast with this weird speaking English guy. And I realized that I got this moment. Do you remember this moment? And he or she will probably say, yeah. And then you'll go, I feel like I got this wrong. I did this and this is why I think I did it. And I shouldn't have done that. And I'm sorry. And it might feel like a very over the top reaction that's not needed, but the healing you will find in that, rather than wrestling with your, and this isn't specifically about you.
No, I get it.
But rather than wrestling within yourself, God, I got that wrong. How am I going to deal with that guilt? And deal with it. You can revisit any moment in your life with the person that was there,
right?
All the while they're still alive,
right?
But you do run out of time, because at some point you will die, and at some point they will die. So whilst you're alive, whilst you're around, and you have an opportunity to revisit those situations, do it.
Right.
I watched a beautiful clip a couple of days ago, which was a podcast host, much like yourself, who had two people on this podcast, and he said, how would you feel if I said I was going to give you both $1 million each? And they were like, would be amazing. He said, so I'm going to transfer you $1 million each, and in the morning you wake up, that $1 million is in your bank account. What could you do with it? He said, well, that'd be incredible. I could do this for charity, and I could do that, and do this, and blah, blah. And he was like, incredible. Now, how about instead of that $1 million, I give you $10 million. And instead of in the morning, I give it to you now. You won't wake up tomorrow morning. You can still do all of those charitable things you want to do. You just have to do them now, but you don't wake up tomorrow morning. He said, so how incredible is that? What you're saying is waking up just one more morning is worth more to you than $10 million. Why don't we walk around life like that, living like that every day? Because we don't. We walk around with a rucksack full of rocks.
Right, holding us down.
Burdened by stuff, feeling sorry for ourselves. But in actual fact, you would sacrifice £10 million just to wake up tomorrow. You would prefer to wake up tomorrow than have £10 million in your account and not.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. It makes you realize.
Yeah.
So revisit these situations. You got something wrong in life? Cool. We all do that. Revisit it. Contact the person you got it wrong with. Say sorry. Tell them you understand why you got it wrong. Tell them you understand why it hurt them. And they might go, all right, you weirdo. Like 10, mate, that was 10 years ago. Don't worry about it. And you go, okay, cool. But you've processed it.
Right.
And the feeling you will get from that is incredible. There's two more things. I don't know how we're doing for time. But
you're fine. You talk as much as you want. And by the way, the short is titled Float. I looked it up.
Oh, Float. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, there you go. So there are two things I'd like to finish my talks off with. So the first one is a high school teacher, for argument's sake, walked into their classroom and they hand out a blue balloon to every kid in the class. And they say, inflate your blue balloon. Here's a template. They've all got to be the same size. So they all inflate their blue balloon to the same size. And then he says to them, now write your name on that balloon with the pen that's in front of you on the desk. So they write their name on it. Now it says, right now, everybody stay here. And he walks out into the hallway or corridor or whatever you call them in American high schools. And then he throws these 200 blue balloons into this corridor and he mixes them all up. He goes back into the classroom and he says to these students, you've got 3 minutes to find your balloon. Go. So they're all pushing and shoving to get out this narrow doorway, flying over desks, and they get into the hallway and not my balloon, not my balloon, not my balloon. By the end of the 3 minutes, hardly any kids got their balloon. It's chaos. And he says, right, everyone go and sit back down again. So they do. Mixes the balloons up again, just for good measure, and then says, right, this time, every kid walk into the hallway, pick up the first balloon you find and hand it to the child whose name is on it. And within 3 minutes, all the students have got their balloon. And he says to them, that's happiness. If you spend your life barging people out the way to find yours, someone's thrown yours away. If you find somebody else's and hand it to them, someone will hand you yours. That's the way life is supposed to be. Spend your life trying to help other people find their happiness, and you will find yours. And that's much like this revisiting situations. Even if you contacted a friend after 10 years and said, I remember doing this and it really upset you and I'm sorry. They might not even have ever thought about it again, but they will hand you a little bit of your happiness because they'll go, oh, mate, don't worry about it. Guess where your guilt goes?
Yeah.
It's gone.
Gone.
It evaporates.
It lifts. Yeah.
And it's replaced with a little bit of happiness.
Yeah.
Because you've been a good person. And they also will like you a little bit more. It's just a fact. They will just go, oh, that's weird, but what a lovely thing to do.
Right.
And they might then go, do you know what? I should probably say sorry for a couple of people. Who knows? Who knows what effect it can have? But it's a beautiful concept. And the other one that I finish up with is a genuine experiment. And it was conducted in the 1950s by a doctor called Dr. Richter, who was a Harvard graduate. And he conducted an experiment with a rat in a bucket of water. And he put the rat in a bucket of water and he timed it to see how long it would swim for. And it swam for around 15 minutes. He then took the rat out of the bucket, let it recover, gave it some water and food. And then after a period of time, put the same rat back in the same bucket of water and timed it again to see how long it would swim for. And the second time it swam, bear in mind the first time it started to drown after 15 minutes. The second time it swam for 60 hours.
Because it knew something was at the end.
The scientific conclusion was the rat had hope.
Yeah.
It believed if it swam for long enough, that hand would come back in the water and pluck it out because that's what happened before. And therein lies the power of hope.
Right.
Hope can get you from drowning after 15 minutes to still swimming after 60 hours. That is a huge, huge difference. And in doing podcasts like this, you give people hope. You become a hand for that drowning rat in a bucket of water. I have become that hand. I have also definitely been the rat.
Right.
And I've needed that hand.
Right.
And it's when we are both, or when we have been both, as I think more people have probably been the rat in the water than have been the hand. But we can all be the hand. We can all be that person just by doing things like this, by talking about mental health, by keeping it current, by being open and honest, by revisiting past problems and discretions and things we get wrong. You give that person, by apologizing to something 10 years later, if that's what it is, you give them a little bit of hope that people can heal, people can learn, people can revisit things they got wrong and say sorry. That's a very beautiful, beautiful concept as well.
I would hazard to say that being a rat facilitates this end of being the hand as well.
Yes, definitely.
It adds a perspective that if you haven't been the rat before, if you haven't swum for 15, 20, 30 minutes on your own, waiting to see if there's a hand coming, without having been that, maybe it's a little more difficult to see why someone is swimming.
Yeah, 100%. And it's definitely harder to know that you need to be the hand. It's harder to see that you need to be the hand. But this is where these conversations change that. And I believe, interestingly enough, someone listening to this that's never suffered with anything will hear some of the symptoms that I've described within me of when I was struggling and go, oh my God, that's my friend.
Right.
And instantly reach out to that person. Well, now they're the hand. They may never have struggled.
Right.
Now they can become that hand that's going to reach you and heal. And it's literally just like everything, like overcoming racism, homophobia, misogyny, sexism, any form of oppression, any form of prejudice that exists in the world is all about the same thing: a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding. Because we are fearful. Naturally, human beings are fearful of things we don't understand.
Yeah, deathly afraid of things we don't understand.
Yeah. So educate yourselves.
Right.
Well, that's what we should do. We should go, I don't understand that. I'm scared of it. All right. Well, then let's learn about it. Because if you can tell the difference between a cobra and a milk snake, you're going to live a lot longer. You know, there's no point being scared of snakes. Be scared of the right snake.
Right.
But you're only going to learn what snake is bad for you by going, I'm scared of snakes. So let me learn a bit about. And it's the same with absolutely everything else.
Yeah. A little bit of education helps it goes a long way.
It does. Yeah. And literally with everything.
Yes.
With everything.
Well, I have 2 questions I end every podcast with.
Well,
the first is a little explanation that I got the title of this podcast. A coworker of mine suggested it, and it was ironic because he's much younger than I am, but he suggested a book that I'd read way back when. I'm trying to look it up to see what data is actually released on, and that's not very important. I read it years ago, and it's called The Things They Carried, and it was by Tim O'Brien. And Tim O'Brien wrote this novel. It's a set of short stories, basically, and it's based in Vietnam. And it's American platoon in Vietnam. And it kind of covers what these guys took into battle. So if it's a radio operator, he took the radio and everything, you know, whether you're the machine gunner, he takes the machine gun and all the accoutrement that goes along with it. And so, but it also talks about what they bring out of that battle, the scars and the experiences. And so that's where I'd kind of bastardize my title of the things we all carry based off of that. And that's a long way of getting around to why I called it and why I came up with this question. But I like to ask everybody something about an everyday carry, something you might carry on your person every day that you kind of feel naked without, or it's kind of a security blanket, for lack of a better word.
Well, that's a really good question. My mind instantly goes to all the things that I carry that are negative.
Well, yeah, they're there.
Which is a much easier question to answer. I guess the thing that I carry that makes me feel, that gives me comfort, that makes me feel happy or makes me feel secure is honesty.
Okay.
I carry with me a level of honesty that some people find offensive. But I just think it's the most powerful tool, because if you ask any of my friends, what do I think of them? They know. No one goes, oh, I'm not sure. People are aware if I don't like them. People are aware if I love them, because I'll tell them. I tell my male colleagues in the fire service, the ones that I'm close to, if I want to phone to them, you know, like Dino or Leon, I will say to them, love you, man, at the end of a call, because I do. So why not say it? And I love going through life that way, because even the people that find it uncomfortable or confronting to meet me and find me that way, it very quickly becomes something about me that they like. And I like being able to go through life knowing that, well, if they don't like me, it's not because of me. It's because of something that's happened to them.
Right.
Because I'm a good person. And when I say don't like, I'm aware that people out there, you know, you can't like everybody that you meet, right?
Right.
So, but I'm on about having a dislike for somebody as opposed to them just not being your kind of person.
So
there's nothing to dislike about me.
Did that honesty come about from the experience, or was that always there?
No, it's definitely come about from the experience. Before all of this, there was a large part of me that going back to that chameleon situation, there was a need to fit in. There was a need for me to change my colors because I needed to be liked, because that's where my value, in the eyes of others, my value lied in them being able to go, oh, Rick's cool. Yeah, he likes all the same things as me, even if some of those things I didn't like. Whereas what I realized is you form much deeper connections with people through difference, not through the things you all do the same. If you look at the dynamics of a friendship group, if you've got 12 people in a friendship group, they all like the same things, do the same things, and have the same. Where's your uniqueness? Where do you fit in? You could be anybody. Any one of you leaves that group, no one cares. They've lost nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're you and you've got a unique group of friends and you all bring different things to the table, much like a football team. If you've got a football team made up of wide receivers and no quarterback, how many games you winning?
Yeah.
Utterly pointless. You need people with the different skill sets. You need a collection of people that all do different things that make the team work. realizing that has been brilliant for me. And that ties in with the honesty, because I'm honestly who I am. And when you can be who you are honestly, it's a very powerful thing.
It's coming kind of full circle then, because we talked about that chameleon for you at the beginning. Is that something that's diminished or been replaced then since all of that?
It now becomes a thing of need rather than a need to be it.
Okay. That makes sense.
If I'm in a situation where, say I'm in church, whilst I would normally swear quite happily in my daily language, I'm not going to do it in church.
Right.
It's not appropriate.
Right.
You know, if I'm going to tell an inappropriate joke, I'm going to do it with people that don't mind hearing an inappropriate joke.
Right.
I'm not going to do it in a family Christmas gathering in front of my net. That, so to that extent, I will still chameleon, and as in I will adjust my natural self
right
to fit in with my environment for all of the right reasons. But what I won't do is look at an environment and go, I need to fit into that. So how do I change myself to fit into that environment?
Right.
I don't have an inherent need to fit into that environment. I have a need to be me. If I'm a lion in the Outlands, then I'm a lion in the Outlands. That's where I'm going to be. If I go into the jungle, then I'm going to be a lion in the jungle. But that's who I'm going to be. I'm still going to try and make my environment work for me, but I'm not going to change who I am.
Yeah, that
just how I fit in.
I mean, if you're just gather around and your circle is all the people that have all the same thoughts and predilections that you do, it's a boring situation. It's an echo chamber. It's an echo chamber is what it is. And you live off of just that, and you never venture outside of that, and you never learn and you never grow for certain.
That's what I was going to say. There's no growth there. If you look at the state of Twitter, like the reason Twitter is so toxic is because people go on there thinking everybody is like them.
Yeah.
So they'll express a view and they're fully expecting the rest of the world to go, you're so right.
Right.
And they get bombarded by people going, what are you talking about? That's utter nonsense. And who knows which person is right or wrong? It's an opinion, it's a perspective. But because those people have surrounded themselves with people that think the same, say the same thing, act the same way, they think the whole world's like that.
Yep.
Open your eyes. It's not. It's full of different perspectives and different views.
Especially, I don't know how you find the fire service in England, but here, that's what the fire service is. It is an echo chamber. And when you fly against that, fly the opposite direction in that chamber, well, you make yourself a target at times.
100%. I've said this for a long, long time to people. At a fire station, it is one of the bitchiest environments you're ever going to work in your entire life. You'd think being surrounded by men that consider themselves alpha male would be this like great camaraderie, and there is a lot of that, but there is also a lot of cutting people's legs away behind their backs.
We're some petty sons of bitches.
And it's always born of the same thing. It's always born of insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
When people lash out when they don't need to, it's because they are insecure about something.
So the second question I like to ask, and this one catches you off guard, so I apologize. I like to ask people about a book they like to suggest to the audience. Something you've read. It could be recent. It could be from a historical standpoint, but something that you've read that will add some value to lives.
Easiest question you could have asked me.
Okay.
It's by a British author called Charlie Maxey.
Okay.
And it's called The Boy, the Horse, the Fox and the Mole.
Okay.
And it is a cartoon picture book. And it is literally just quote after quote after quote of beautiful things that he's written. And I'll give you an example. And this one doesn't actually appear in the book, but this, I recorded this on a podcast with a friend. And when me saying this has gone viral on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And when I say viral, I mean 250 million views plus worldwide.
Right.
It's been translated into like 17 different languages or something. And it's the most beautiful quote. I was asked what's my advice for overthinkers. And I said about this book, and I said, there's a quote by this author, Charlie Maxey. And again, I hasten to add, I've since learned that this quote doesn't actually appear in the book. It's one of his other pieces of work. And it's a boy and a horse are in the woods. And the boy says to the horse, I can't see a way through. And the horse says, can you see your next step?
Mm-hmm.
The boy says, yes. And he says, then just take that. And it's the concept that
Yeah.
if you look at the end game and the big picture,
Yeah.
it can seem so far away. You just like, I can't see an end. I don't know what to do. The simple process is just take your next step. Because if you take enough of them, you reach the end of the woods, you reach the end of the forest, you get out to where you need to be.
Yeah. And that first
And
step,
that book filled with those quotes is just beautiful.
that first step is a doozy though.
Sometimes it can be, yeah. But you know what? I always say you just keep breaking it down and breaking it down and breaking it down into smaller steps. If that first step is overwhelming, then
Right.
break that step down even further. You know, if you want to start running and your target is 5 miles and you go, right, well, my first step is to go out and do a 2-mile run. You might go, I can't do a 2-mile run. Right, well, that's the wrong first step.
Right.
First step is put your trainers on.
Right.
The next step is open your front door.
Yeah.
You know, the next step is take a step. That you can break it down as much as you need to. But there is always a start point.
It's like the opposite of the what if game. I don't know if you've ever done what if. So you think about a decision you have to make, and it's, well, what if I, and you take that and you go, what if, I don't know, it just for, what if I went to work today? What's the worst that could happen? And you do that. And you go, okay, so what if that happens? Well, what if, and you get down all the way down and you finally figure it out. And a lot of times it'll come down to, oh, I'm just scared to do that, or I'm just nervous, or I'm just, and it kind of breaks it down it's the reverse order of breaking it down into steps.
Yeah. Something that I'm not a particularly religious person. I understand religion in all its forms, and I understand that it brings great peace to people. I understand it brings hope. I understand there are many, many, many positives about religion. It's just not something that I particularly believe in. I know it can be a lot of your listeners now turning off, but
they've heard me talk about it. So if they haven't turned off yet, then we're okay.
So I learned recently, obviously as we understand it from a non-religious perspective, the universe is exponentially expanding continuously. And I read something recently that theorizes that at some point there are enough supermassive stars in the universe that they will all reach the end of their life and they will start to collapse. And when these stars collapse, they will form huge black holes. And when this happens enough times, what's going to happen is the universe will no longer be able to expand, and it will start to shrink again because things will be swallowed up by these black holes. And the more this happens, the more black holes form, the faster that happens, until eventually, theoretically, the universe ceases to exist. Everything is absorbed into one black hole after another, and we are just left with nothing.
Right.
Nothing. So if you consider that at some point in the future, whether it's 1 billion years or whatever, nothing is what will exist, then what matters?
Right.
The only thing that matters really is what we can control, what's in our immediate vicinity. If I don't get that job that I've just gone for, does it matter? Ultimately, no, because ultimately I don't matter. Ultimately, I don't exist. Ultimately, everything will end anyway.
Right.
So who actually cares? What matters is how happy my son is. That matters because that will continue to be the case whilst I'm alive. That will end before the universe does.
Right.
So when you look at that, I just think it's a beautiful way of looking at problems and just go, well, do you know what? If nothing matters, I'm going to try everything.
Right.
It doesn't matter if I stand on stage and deliver a talk to 1,000 students and 10 of them in that room get something from it and the rest don't. Why does it matter?
Right.
I'm never going to see them again. And ultimately I'm going to die. So who cares?
So
I'm still going to go and do it again.
So enjoy the party. Last person, turn out the lights.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
My man,
Life is short.
I've appreciated this conversation.
Yeah, me too. It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time and joining me. Thanks for putting up with the sputters and starts and stops and everything to get to this point. So I do appreciate it. I appreciate it immensely.
Thanks to you and your listeners for putting up with my slight lisp.
Whatever. They put up with me every time they listen. So whatever, it doesn't matter. So go enjoy the rest of your day. I know you're on nights, so get some rest.
Yeah, I've got to go as well because I start soon. I'm being picked up in 25 minutes.
Oh,
I've got to
cool.
Get my skates on now.
This is a perfect time to end it then.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed it.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Go enjoy your day. Be safe at work tonight and take care.
Cheers.
All right. We're out.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com, for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.